Hey, good afternoon, everyone. For those I don't know, I'm Helen Boucher, the Dean of Tufts University School of Medicine, and it's a great pleasure to welcome you to today's conversation with John Green, who authored this year's common book, Everything is Tuberculosis, the history and persistence of our deadliest infection. We're honored to welcome John to Tufts. Through his writing and advocacy, he has helped millions of people understand tuberculosis, not only as a medical condition, but as a human and moral challenge, shaped by history, inequity, and whose lives societies choose to value. His work invites us to think differently about what it means to address a curable disease that remains one of the world's deadliest. As an infectious diseases physician and scientist, I find that call to action deeply powerful and urgent. Today's event is especially meaningful because for the first time, we've brought together 3 signature Tufts programs: the Maurice S. Siegel Lecture, the Tisch College's Solomon Speaker Series, and the MD Common Book Program, to host this conversation at the intersection of medicine, global health, and civic life. We're grateful as well for the support of the Tufts Center for Global Public Health and the School of Medicine Global Health Faculty Council, which helped make this collaboration possible. The MD Common Book Program, now in its 13th year, is a partnership between the School of Medicine and Tisch College that brings our students into a shared reading experience during orientation and the early months of medical school. Clearly, this year's selection has resonated deeply with our community, as evidenced by today's sold-out event. It is energizing to see such a strong turnout from across our campuses, particularly from students, faculty, and staff. And I have to say, this auditorium is not usually full. It's great to see. I want to offer a warm welcome as well to everyone who's joining us by live stream. So the Dr. Maurice S. Siegel Lecture was established in 1973 and created to bring distinguished speakers to Tufts to address issues of global importance. The lecture reflects Dr. Siegel's philanthropic vision and longstanding collaboration between the Fletcher School and Tufts University School of Medicine. Dr. Siegel established the Lung Station Research Center at Tufts and would find today's discussion particularly relevant. We're deeply grateful to the Siegel family for sustaining this lecture series for more than 50 years. While Dr. Siegel's son Peter could not join us today, we're delighted to welcome Dr. Siegel's niece, Elaine. Welcome, Elaine. We're also so proud to partner with Tisch College's Solomon Speaker Series, named in honor of Ambassador Alan Solomont and Susan Lewis Solomont. Since its founding in 2014, the series has invited students and the broader community to engage with pressing civic questions and diverse perspectives. Before I begin, I want to recognize someone without whom today's event would not be possible, Dr. Ram Subbaraman. Where is Ram? So Ram is a fellow infectious disease physician, epidemiologist, and associate professor here at Tufts, and he has dedicated his career to improving tuberculosis care and outcomes globally. We would not be here without Ram's leadership and vision, and we're deeply grateful to you, Ram, for your role in making the conversation possible. Thank you all for being here and for your engagement with these urgent and important issues. It's now my pleasure to invite Dr. Ram Subbaraman to the stage to introduce John Green.
Hi, everyone. So thank you so much, Dean Boucher, for that kind introduction. So about a year ago, I was having a dinner with 2 colleagues, another TB researcher and an Indian journalist who writes about TB, when I heard them talking excitedly about John Green. So I asked what to this crowd I think will sound like a terribly uninformed question. Who is John Green? My colleagues laughed, and one of them provided an elated response. John is the best thing to happen to TB. Her comment reflects the fact that being a TB researcher in the US is a pretty lonely endeavor. Many Americans believe TB to be a historic relic, a disease that existed a century ago but has now faded away. A common response I get is, TB, is that still going around? Well, TB is very much still going around, and in fact is the leading infectious cause of death from a single pathogen globally. I was originally inspired to commit my career to TB 20 years ago when I was a medical student and spent a year conducting research and seeing patients at YRG Care, a renowned HIV hospital in India. At that time, HIV treatment hadn't been scaled up. YRG Care had a small inpatient unit where people would get admitted often at death's door. Almost everyone who I saw die on that ward, which was many people, died of TB. I've been studying TB ever since. A major challenge for those of us in the TB community is that suffering from TB is divided across global fault lines of our global society, disproportionately affecting the poorest in the global south, where I conduct my research. India, where I spend most of my time, alone accounts for 1/4 of all people who suffer from TB and 1/3 of all TB deaths globally. I'm lucky to have a rich community of colleagues in India committed to helping those who live and die with TB, from leading scientists like Dr. Soumya Swaminathan to passionate journalists who's a mutual friend of mine, John's, Vidya Krishnan. But in the US, TB is viewed as something that happens elsewhere. Within our country, most people affected by TB are immigrants and refugees, communities who are othered by our society, a reality that we've all seen acutely on TV in the last few weeks. The result is that, as with other major global killers like malaria and childhood diarrhea, TB has a tiny footprint in terms of US federal research funding. For those reasons, I jumped at the opportunity to spotlight TB by inviting John Green to come to Tufts a year ago. And John was very generous in his initial response, noting that he felt so guilty that he'd try hard to say yes if I asked again, even though he's absolutely booked. So I did ask again, but this time with a lot of support from across Tufts. And I want to highlight the tireless efforts of Jen Greer-Morrissey, Jessica Burns at Tisch College, and many other people across TUSM, Fletcher, and of course, most importantly, the support of the Siegel Lecture Series and the Solomon Speaker Series. And I'm grateful to Dean Boucher today for facilitating this conversation. Now back to my original question, who is John Green? I now know. John is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of Looking for Alaska, An Abundance of Catherines, Paper Towns, The Fault in Our Stars, Turtles All the Way Down, The Anthropocene Reviewed, and the book we're here to talk about today, Everything is Tuberculosis. His books have been published in more than 55 languages with 24 million copies in print. He's received the Michael L. Prince Award, the Edgar Award, and has twice been a finalist for the Los Angeles Times Book Prize. Outside of his books, John and his brother Hank started the YouTube video blog called Vlogbrothers with the goal of, quote, raising nerdy to the power of awesome. Their videos have been viewed by more than 1 billion times and raised millions of dollars to fight global poverty. John and Hank also launched an educational YouTube channel called Crash Course, co-founded Complexly, and host an advice podcast called Dear Hank and John. In 2019, they created Good.Store, which donates 100% of profits from selling eco-friendly household products to charity. And to build on these accolades, I'll just add one more. John Green is the best thing to happen to TB. John, we're thrilled to have you here at Tufts. John and Dean Boucher will be in conversation before opening up to audience and Q&A. Please welcome John Green and Dean Boucher.
Hello. It's so nice to be with you. Can you hear me okay?
Everybody here okay?
Great.
Great.
Oh, it's great to be with you.
Great. So, John, we're thrilled to have you here. And, you know, as Ram just mentioned, we heard from the response, many here got to know you first from your writing young adult novels, including my daughters. Can you share with us how you got interested and involved with tuberculosis and what prompted you to write a nonfiction book about it?
Yeah, no, I suspect that if, like, when I wrote The Fault in Our Stars, if you'd told me that, like, I would get really into tuberculosis and write a book about tuberculosis, I would have said, is that still a thing? I have long been interested in global health. You know, my parents both come from the nonprofit world and worked with marginalized communities and fragile ecosystems in their careers, and it was very important to them that we try to do good in our work, my brother and me, and they don't really, you know, you just want to make your parents proud, at least I do, and like, it does not make my parents proud when I sell a lot of books, it does not make my parents proud when I make money, it makes my parents proud when we do other stuff, do weird things, things that aren't, you know, down the beaten path, and so I've long been interested in global health and interested in human health, wanting to understand how healthcare systems work, how the big systems that shape our lives work. But I got interested in tuberculosis in particular in 2019 when I was visiting Sierra Leone to learn about the maternal healthcare system there. Our family has invested a lot in the maternal healthcare system in partnership with the Sierra Leonean Ministry of Health. And on our last day there, the doctors we were traveling with, you'll know this if you've read the book, asked if we could visit a TB hospital. And I was, I thought of myself as a relatively well-informed global health person. I did not know that TB is the world's deadliest infectious disease. I would have guessed that it would have been malaria or maybe HIV or something. I mean, TB would have been pretty far down my list. But then we went to this hospital, and I met a kid named Henry, which is also my son's name. And in meeting Henry, my life really changed because I started to understand that, if I followed one person's story, you follow one person's story and it changes your life. A lot of times, many of you will have individual patients who stick with you, especially in your early training. And for me, Henry is that kid. Henry is that person. And so I never would have written this book if I hadn't met Henry. And following Henry's story over the next 6 years into today has been a great privilege for me.
That's great. Thank you. And your comment about, for our students, the connection with patients, so important, individual people, just huge, and AI is never going to take that away. So
no, I wouldn't worry about that. Nobody wants to have their hand held as they die by Claude.
So you're really well known for your work as a storyteller and educator, but you're also now an activist. And you've advocated for reducing prices to test and treat tuberculosis. You've spoken at the UN and many more places. And clearly you're spending your time. This is really important to you. And in the postscript of your book, you talk about the megaphone that you now have and the responsibility that comes with it. We're a school that one of our 4 values is social responsibility. So this is very resonant with our community. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your journey as an activist and if there are times when balancing your role as an activist and your activism conflicts with other parts of your work or your life.
Yeah, of course. I mean, everybody has to balance their lives however they can, But I try to remember, it's easy to, when you are yourself, the whole problem with being a person is that you spend the whole time you're here inside of one consciousness, right? Like looking at the world through only one set of eyes, and you have no idea what it's like to be anyone else. And even the people who are closest to you, you see in the context of yourself, like my spouse, my best friend, my whatever. And so it's easy to kind of cast yourself as the hero of the story. Super easy for me anyway. I don't know about the rest of y'all, but I want to be clear that in our family's advocacy and activism around TB, we're not the heroes of the story. I'll tell you one quick anecdote to illustrate this. When I was in Sierra Leone the first time in 2019, I saw this community health worker. Her name is Ruth, and she was going around visiting people with TB. And a lot of times, you got to take some of these medicines you need to take with food, but people may not have food to take with their medicine, and then they can throw up really fast. And then if you throw up, it doesn't do any good to take the medicine because the medicine just comes right back up. And so Ruth's sitting with this woman who has not eaten today and therefore not taken her medication today. And, from the perspective of the healthcare system, this is a non-compliant patient, right? This is somebody who is going to be lost to follow-up or whatever phrase we're going to use to describe this non-compliant patient. From the perspective of that person, she doesn't want to throw up, right? Which is a pretty universal human experience. And so Ruth explains to her that if she puts some sugar in her water and takes the medicine with a little sugar water, it can help keep the medicine down, which is its own horror, right? Because we should be treating tuberculosis not just with medicine but also with food, since we know that half the people who develop active tuberculosis will also be malnourished. We know that food is a treatment for TB. We know that food is preventative for TB. So that's its own horror. And then as we're leaving, I leave early. I sort of start to walk to the next patient, and I see out of the corner of my eye Ruth slip this woman the equivalent of about $2 to buy some food that day. And that cost Ruth so much more than any gift that you or I will make, right? Ruth is the hero of this story. The people who actually deliver care are the heroes of the story. So, when we're fighting to try to lower the cost of a TB test, we're not we get all the headlines, like we get all the attention, and my brother and I are told like, oh, you're doing such an important job and whatever, but like, really, we're not. I mean, the world should have lowered the price of TB tests decades ago. We should never have been in a situation where TB tests cost $12 when we know they cost less than $5 to make. We're only in that situation because we've sort of chosen that world, and so, yeah, that's something I want to emphasize. But when it comes to the balance, I love writing stories. It's literally children's play, like I've been doing it since I was 6 years old, and nobody ever paid me to do it back then or read my stories, but I had the same feeling of joy writing them. And I want to keep that in my life. I want that to be part of my life, because it does bring me joy and helps me feel like the world is not, merely horrific. And I didn't mean that as a joke, but I know what you mean. I know what you mean. And so it's helpful for me. It keeps me hopeful. And so I have to, in your life too, you'll find this, I suspect, that you have to, med school can totally take over your life. I can't even imagine how hard it is. I barely graduated from regular college. And so you'll find in your life, though, that you have to do things that feed you in order to be able to do the other stuff. And hopefully, like, studying does feed you in some ways, and like, making connections among things and understanding the relationship between proteins and amino acids. Did I do it? Might be its own form of excitement, but like, you'll have to find things that feed you intellectually and emotionally, and that sustain you in order to do that other work. And for me, that's writing stories. So I have to keep writing in order to be able to do the other work too.
That's great. That's great. So your book underscores profound flaws in the medical system, including issues around stigma, access, and trust. You talk about Henry's dad choosing traditional healers because they viewed Henry not as an infectious case to be feared, but as a human child to be healed. And while there's always been mistrust of medicine and science, including now, I think it's fair to say that public mistrust here in the US especially has reached new heights.
Yeah.
So for the future healthcare professionals in this room, including MDs, public health professionals, research scientists, PAs, all of us, how can we take care of people and also work to fix these larger systemic issues?
It's really hard. I mean, I don't want to pretend that it's easy. And look, we all have to work within deeply flawed systems, right? Like, I have to work inside the YouTube algorithm. It's not that good. They don't. I will answer your question, but a quick side note.
It's all good.
These algorithms, I think part of the reason that we're in this place of deep mistrust is because of the algorithmically generated internet. And I think the reason that people don't trust the information that they're told by experts is because we've built an internet that does such a good job of making people distrust expertise in institutions. And we've done that because the internet does not reward accuracy. It does not reward making you happier or better informed. It does not reward making you more connected to other people. It rewards the time that you spend on the site. That is the only thing it cares about, is how many seconds you spend on TikTok or Instagram or Threads or Twitter every day. That's all it cares about. And that's true for the YouTube algorithm too, right? So like, when my brother and I are making videos, we're literally competing against Mr. Beast. And like, he's better at capturing attention than we are. That's not an insult to him or to me. He's really, really good at capturing attention. And we have to compete in that landscape. We have 20 years experience competing in that landscape. If you're a PA student or a public health professional or a doctor, you probably don't have a lot of experience trying to compete and navigate that landscape, and compete with not just Mr. Beast, but with hordes of misinformation that have a ton of salience, right? Like, it would be great if raw milk made life better. It would make a lot of sense, right? Like, in the old days, people seemed to have it better and they drank raw milk. Now, it turns out that in the old days, of course, people didn't have it better. They died much earlier, and they died partly of bovine tuberculosis that they got from drinking raw milk. But it has a certain salience to say, you've been lied to. Because ultimately, people are right not to trust the healthcare system. The healthcare system has failed many people in the United States. It is really expensive. It can bankrupt you. It does sometimes provide, doesn't sometimes provide the kind of care that every human being deserves. And so, just as Henry's dad wasn't wrong to distrust the healthcare system in Sierra Leone, I understand people distrusting the healthcare system and feeling like, oh, it's not fair, it's not just. It isn't fair, it isn't just. They're right about that. What they're wrong about, and this is, I think, a point to hammer home when you're talking with patients, when you're talking with your family, what they're wrong about is the solution. The solution is not to abandon evidence-based practices for making people healthier. The solution isn't to abandon pasteurized milk. That's not the solution. The solution is to build a better and more just and more fair healthcare system. You're all going to participate in that work one way or another, every day dealing with patients on an individual level. How to engage with it systemically is an open question for me. That's something I really continue to struggle with. I don't know how to change people's minds on the internet. I worry sometimes. I'll give you an example. So we have a survey that we send out every year to people who watch our videos on Vlogbrothers. And about 60,000 people filled it out this year. And less than 2% of them voted for Donald Trump. So when I'm talking to people in our community, I'm talking to almost nobody who voted for the current administration, right? And in that case, it's very difficult for me to reach across the aisle because nobody on the other side of the aisle is hearing me. Because I've successfully built this audience that I think is pretty cool. Thank you. I've successfully built this audience that shares my values, which is important, right? I want to be in a community that shares my values. But at the same time, that means that it's really difficult to reach outside of that and effectively communicate to others. And I don't have an easy solution for that. In terms of the systemic changes we need, of course, we need a healthcare system that serves all people equally. And we're very far away from that right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So turn our attention a little bit. In the book, there's a time when you're speaking with a patient about medication compliance, and you share that you struggle to take your medicine even without the barriers that TB patients face, like hunger, malnutrition, transportation, refrigeration, all the things we heard about. That's a really powerful humanizing moment, and even more so that you shared your own personal experiences and struggles with OCD and depression. Why was it important for you to include those pieces of yourself in the book?
Well, when talking to people, it's important because, I remember one time I was at a mental hospital in a poor country, and I explained that I'd been a patient in a mental hospital, and everybody was shocked because the kinds of people who are patients at mental hospitals don't seem like the kind of people who are like me. And I think it's important because it's a reminder that you can have serious mental health issues and also be happy, also have a good life. I'm not always happy. I don't always, sometimes I can't function, but I'm very fortunate in that OCD and depression are, my OCD and depression are both fairly treatable. And so if I do the stuff that I need to do in order to treat my chronic healthcare condition like a chronic healthcare condition, take my medicine, do the therapy stuff I'm supposed to do, change my behaviors in the ways that I'm supposed to change my behaviors, then, I'm not always okay, but I can get to a place where I'm okay if I have a little time, if I can give myself some time, and if society can give me some time. But I was really reluctant to talk about it for a long time because it's personal and it felt embarrassing. But part of the reason it's embarrassing is because people like me don't talk about it. And so eventually I came to the feeling that it was better to be open about it. And that's really been a gift in my life, actually. I thought that it would be this burden where I would, you know, it would be sort of a one-way street where I would talk about it and hopefully people would benefit from it, but it would make my life a little worse. But actually it's made my life better because it's done some good on the front of my own self-stigmatization or whatever you want to call it.
That's great, thank you. So I want to ask about language that we as a society choose to use around disease. You talk in the book about TB control versus taking cancer, versus talking about cancer care, and how even using a word like compliance, right, when there are so many external barriers to the successful completion of TB treatment, feels like the wrong word. So as a writer, why was it important to bring these language choices to our attention, and what is the language we use to talk about diseases of injustice and stigmatized diseases like TB matter?
Well, I'm a huge word nerd. You know, it's my whole game. It's the thing that I do all day. I wake up, I play Wordle, I play Spelling Bee, and then I play with words for the rest of the day. So I do think the word choice we use matters. I think the way we describe, and I'm not perfect. I mean, I'm always learning about this stuff. Like sometimes somebody will come up to me and be like, you know the history of that word? And I'll be like, whew, sorry, geez, never use that word again. Because one's always learning. But I think with a phrase like TB control, I understand the urge. I understand the reasoning behind it, right? Like, you can't talk about cancer control in the same way because it's harder to build structures that can prevent the spread of cancer because cancer is generally not contagious. But the phrase TB control, from a patient's perspective, is pretty challenging, I think. And ultimately, what we want to provide is care and solutions, not control. And also, we don't want someone living. In fact, I know a lot of people with TB who hate the word patient, so I just used the word patient, and now they're going to be mad at me. But I think a lot of times people living with TB who I've talked to feel like the disease is so stigmatizing, right? Like I've had people describe to me having their meds thrown at them from across the room because the people who are dispensing those meds are scared of getting TB. And that may be because they don't have adequate PPE. It may be because they have been misinformed about how tuberculosis spreads. There's all kinds of reasons why that might be the case, but it's still really dehumanizing to have your medicine thrown at you instead of handed to you. It's dehumanizing when somebody says, as is described in one TB book I read, while doing chest x-rays, an x-ray technician said, "It's not even 10 a.m. and they're already coughing on me." Like that phrase, "they're already coughing on me," it's dehumanizing in a literal sense, right? Like you're not describing the person, you're not talking to the person, you're talking as if the person who's in the room is not in the room. And so I think the way we talk to people living with illness really does matter. I've experienced that myself. I mean, I live with chronic mental health illnesses, but I also have had most of the major itises. I've had meningitis and orbital cellulitis, and I've been hospitalized for infections a few times in my life. And it makes a huge difference the way people talk to you and whether people act like you're in the room or not. I remember being sort of semi-conscious when I had meningitis, and my doctor, this lovely man, saying to my wife, "I don't think he's going to die." And I was like trying to swim up from out of the depths like, what the hell? Is that on the menu? Like, step outside the door. So, yeah. I do think it matters how we talk to folks when they're sick, even if they don't appear to be totally conscious.
Great advice. So I'm going to turn us back to the book.
Great.
I have to ask about Henry. So I think probably everybody in the room can think of a person we've met or had the privilege to care for who had a powerful, lasting impression on us and maybe even set us on a particular path in our careers. What's Henry up to these days? How's he doing? And does he know what a tremendous impact his story has had and he's had?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that he fully knows, but he definitely knows, and he has the book. He's read the book. I mean, he read the book a bunch of times before it came out to fact check it and just make sure that I had everything right. But yeah, he's definitely aware of the impact that his story has had, and very grateful for that. And he's doing amazing. He's in his last semester at the University of Sierra Leone. He's studying like public resource management, so like how governments like Sierra Leone's government that have extremely limited resources should best split up those resources, and how to prevent corruption and stuff like that. He's a fascinating young man. He wants to go to law school. That's his dream. And we talk all the time, so we talk almost every day. And he's doing really, really well. His mom is doing well. I saw too is started a business selling. I mean, this is the main business in her community, basically selling detergents and soaps and stuff that she buys in bulk and then sells. And they're doing great. They've moved into a nice house. So when Henry first came home from the hospital, he was staying in a place, because Aisatu had been so profoundly, Henry's mother was so profoundly impoverished by the experience of trying to get Henry the medical care that he needed, that by the time he came home, he spent almost 3 years in the hospital. And by the time he came home, they were living in really bad conditions. So their roof leaked, and so he would be really, really wet at night no matter where he slept, and he would get really bad shivers, and he got malaria several times, and when he gets malaria, he gets sicker than most people because he has some post-TB lung disease, which is very common for TB survivors. And they were really living on the edge for a long time without very little access to any kind of public services and inadequate nutrition and everything else that affects people living in profound poverty. But his life is very different now. He's very well supported, and I think as he graduates from college, he's really looking forward to that, and I'm looking forward to that. I mean, I'm excited to go see him graduate.
That's great. That's great. So before we turn to questions from the audience, I just want to end on that was a great hopeful note. On another hopeful note, you talk about TB being subject to a vicious cycle, but there's also the existence of virtuous cycles. And so what are some of the virtuous cycles that you're seeing? You're out on the road, doing a lot of advocacy in global health. And how can people here in this audience contribute to virtuous cycles? And what advice do you have especially for our students, who have that aspiration in their careers?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing, I can't give you advice. I studied early Islamic history, like, I don't know. You saw me try to make a medical joke earlier about the proteins and the amino acids, and I don't think it killed. But I'll say what my friend and mentor Paul Farmer always said, which is, in your work, think of the poor, think of the marginalized, find ways to, include the people who are not included by the social order into your work as you can. I think that it's really challenging, I know, but it's important. This is a very difficult moment. Like, I have no idea what it's like to be you. It seems like it would be pretty hard, though. You lived through some hard times. I lived through relatively easy times when I was your age, and I thought that was normal and natural, and you probably think it's normal and natural to live through very difficult times. It's not. I'm 48. This is the worst it's been, for me anyway. And it's really, really hard. It's hard because the social order doesn't value lives equally. It's hard because there are forces that would further the dehumanization of others, whether those are immigrants or unhoused people or people who are just living lives different from what is considered to be the norm. So we're seeing more people pushed to the edges, and we're seeing more dehumanization of the people pushed to the edges. And if that scares you, especially for those of you who are directly affected by it, who experience yourself being pushed to the edge. I'm deeply sorry, and I also feel a measure of responsibility that this is the world that you've inherited from me and people like me. But I do think that it's not the end of the story. It's really easy to feel like today is the end, right? Because like you see your life as beginning on the day you were born and ending today, which is the most recent day you've lived through. But of course, today is not the end of your life. Today is the middle of your life. And today is not the end of our story as a community or as a country or as a world. Today is the middle of the story of humanity, right? We're 250,000 years into this adventure, and it's gotten pretty weird in the last 200 years. It's gotten pretty intense, but in lots of ways that are strange, but in lots of ways that are wonderful, right? Like 200 years ago, half of kids died before the age of 5. And 25 years ago, about 11 million kids died before the age of 5. And this year, fewer than 5 million will. That's the greatest achievement in the history of our species, and much of it has occurred in the last 25 years. And so there is cause for hope. There is reason to believe that when people decide collectively that we're going to value the lives of children, that we actually can make progress on that front. If we decided collectively that we were going to value the lives of people living with malnutrition or living with tuberculosis or living with HIV, then we would dramatically be able to shift the arc of the story of those diseases. And I believe that we can do that because I have evidence that we can do it. I have evidence that we've done it in the past. I have evidence that when we started to care more about the lives of children, fewer children started to die. In fact, the last year that fewer than 5 million kids died in human history was probably 6,000 years ago, when the population of humans was around 100 million. So we have cause for hope, real cause for hope. But we have to find ways to do it together. And the truth is, for me, that we make more progress when we value the lives of the people who are not being adequately valued by the social order. That's when we make progress. When we decide, oh, children matter. Children surviving to adulthood matters, even though children are vulnerable and super fragile and frail and everything else, and not particularly economically productive, by the way. They matter. And when we decide that all people matter, we will see similar progress. And so to me, it's about valuing all lives equally and then creating systems that reflect that reality, which we know to be true, that every life, every human life is immeasurably valuable. I think then we start to see the progress. So those are some of the virtuous cycles that I see. I know this is a really hard moment, and I know that we are in various vicious cycles that are very difficult, but I don't think this has to be the end of the story.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your really thoughtful and candid comments. We're going to open it up now to the audience for Q&A. We have some people with microphones around, so just raise your hand.
You can ask me about anything, by the way.
Introduce yourself
Not
really
anything.
quickly.
But you don't have to ask me about tuberculosis if you want to ask me about Crash Course or something.
Hi, my name is Shoshana. Thank you so much for talking today. I was wondering, with a challenge as huge as TB, what role do you see for online communities like Nerdfighters? Many people talk and see it as sort of silly. I mean, the name is kind of silly.
It is pretty silly.
But it's also this nerdy, silly energy that has bullied Danaher into dropping TB test prices, especially with Project for Awesome coming up. What role do you see this silliness in tackling the hard problems of the world?
Thank you for that question, and just based on your question, thank you for being a Nerdfighter. When my brother and I started making videos in 2007, I remember we were like, what are we going to do with all this energy? There were like 300 people watching us, and I got this infection behind my eye called orbital cellulitis. I had to be hospitalized, and Hank was like, hey, can you take a picture of yourself with something on your head to cheer John up? And of the 300 people who were watching our videos, this was before the iPhone, so it was hard to take pictures. Of the 300 people who watched our videos, like 270 sent in pictures. And I was like, oh, we could probably do something more interesting than that. And that's why we started the Project for Awesome. That's why we've been doing other projects since then. That said, I remember when Doctors Without Borders and other folks came to us and said, we really need Danaher to lower their test prices, I was like, I'm not sure that we can convince a large for-profit corporation to do something, but we can try, and we did. So Nerdfighter just amazes me. It astonishes me. It is a terrifying, powerful force in the world. I hope it never turns against me, because it's very powerful. But yeah, I think online communities can make a big difference. And that's not just true for our online community. That's true for whatever online community you're part of, right? Like if you're part of online knitting communities that knit socks for folks who need socks, or online communities that work toward mutual aid solutions for different communities. Like we talk so much about the toxicity online, and I was just talking about it. We don't talk enough about the really productive online spaces where people are working together to do cool stuff and make the world suck less. And so I'm very lucky to be part of some of those communities.
Great, thank you. Other questions? I see one up there. Oh, Jen, you want to go here first? Great, then there.
Thank you so much for speaking with us. My name is Dan. I'm a second-year medical student here. This is not a fully formed thought yet, but my question is, like, as an author and an activist yourself, what role do you think storytelling has in, I guess, advocacy and activism for global health equity? I think I asked this because I'm a researcher with Partners in Health myself, and the research is important, but I also see the power of books like this, Atul Gawande's miniseries on Rovina's Choice about, really amplifying these stories. And I also think like global health is such an interdisciplinary space for so many people outside of healthcare and outside of the public health space to engage. And so I think, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I agree with you. I used to think like, oh, it's not my place to be in this world because this is a world for doctors and nurses and PAs and other folks. And then I realized that like actually it needs all of us. Healthcare needs all of us, and it needs storytellers, and it needs poets, and it needs anthropologists. It needs all of us. And so that's I think the role that story has to play. Story has to, I mean, sometimes I feel like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm going to like write a novel when the world is falling apart. But then I think like, well, I don't know, like 200,000 years ago, people would look up at the stars and they would like make patterns where none actually exist and decide that those were hunters or bears or whatever, and then tell stories about the bears. So we've been telling stories for a long time. It's obviously something that's essential to us, that we have that plays a role in our social order. And so if we can tell stories that resonate, that can provide consolation, it can provide encouragement, it can be a site of provocation of thought, all that stuff. And so I do think it matters, although I would rather be a doctor, if I'm being honest. Like, I wish that I were a doctor. Like when I was a chaplain at a children's hospital in a previous life, when I first got out of school, I thought I was going to become a minister or a chaplain, and so they make you do a certain amount of chaplaincy. You'll see this if you work at hospitals. Like you'll meet the little baby chaplains, and be nice to them. Don't say, as one young doctor said to me, can you tell them that their kid is dying? Just ask for support later. Anyway, it was a hard job. It was a really hard job, and I don't really remember where I was going with this. But when I was a chaplain, I remember thinking, God, I wish I could do something. God, I wish I could help these people. I wish that there was something that I could do. And the blessing of being a healthcare professional is that there is something that you can do. The blessing of being a chaplain is that there is also a need for somebody, as my supervisor said, don't just do something, stand there. Mm-hmm. There is a reason to stand there. And there is times when people need someone who just can stand there. And that was my job, really.
That's great. That's great. Up here.
Hi there.
Hi, I'm Thomas. I'm a fourth-year med student. Thanks for chatting with us. You wrote in the book about some of those big inflection points, like industrialization, the discovery of the bacterium, ripe therapy, and then sounds like got interested in TB right around COVID, and then saw this huge public knowledge explosion about communicable disease and public health, and now we're in a post-COVID world, quote unquote. So was it at all, I can't think of a better word than disheartening to see all of that attention, deservedly so, towards COVID, and then see TB continue to be under-researched and under-talked about, and how has that shaped your activism in the last couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, it's not disheartening. I mean, COVID, in the sense that COVID is a crisis, and like it demanded a huge amount of resources because it deserved a huge amount of resources because it was a sudden, unprecedented threat to the entire globe that killed, tens of millions of people in a period of a couple of years, and is still an ongoing health threat. And so a lot of resources needed to be diverted to COVID. That said, the diversion of resources to COVID definitely had a negative impact on tuberculosis care, especially in the poorest countries. Countries like Sierra Leone saw their TB rates go up, their TB death rates go up. People weren't able to access care because hospitals closed. I mean, the hospital that my family and I support closed. The emergency department closed, and because all the healthcare workers got COVID. And got COVID all at the same time, and very suddenly there was very little PPE, very little, infection control, and so, it was those early days were incredibly difficult. What's disheartening to me is that we've known how to cure this disease since 1955, and we choose not to cure it. Like, people talk about, and this is true, I think we're at another inflection point with TB where there are better tools coming, potentially a vaccine that works, which we haven't had in a meaningful way ever. BCG is a vaccine that, can prevent serious illness and death in very young children, but like it isn't an effective vaccine really. And so we're on the edge of maybe getting a vaccine or more than one vaccine. We're on the edge of getting way cheaper tests. So instead of having to fight Danaher for $8 or $10 tests, we can have tongue swab tests that maybe cost $1, which would be game changing. It would be as cheap as microscopy and much, much, much more sensitive. And so that would be exciting. We're seeing new medicines, thanks in part to your research, so that MDR TB may not be the same level of crisis in a person's life that it is today. And so that's all very exciting. We could have been at this inflection point 30 years ago. We could have been at this inflection point, and we could be accelerating the inflection point now if we were pouring resources into TB and treating it as the size of problem it is. But unfortunately, we just don't value the lives of people who get TB in the same way. Pharmaceutical companies can't value them because it's no market. People often talk about TB and other orphan diseases, or TB and other diseases of poverty. And I'm always like, this is a disease that 10 million people get every year and 1 million people die. Like, this is not a tiny problem. It's just a problem that has a tiny market. And obviously I'm not going to fix capitalism today. I'm not going to solve that problem. But finding ways through government investment, through patent buyouts, whatever the strategies are, we need to do more of that to fuel fuel not just research, but also the path from research to real tools. Any other questions? If not, I'll tell stories.
We still have.
Hi.
I can't tell if it's me or...
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll go for it. Hi, my name is Claire. I'm a first-year medical student. And part of the reason that I got into medicine was what you were talking about before, is when you have a patient in front of you, you feel like you can do something active to help. And I'm just wondering, especially as you're raising your kids, who I know are younger than us, how you're hoping to have them balance the humility and hoping to do something with the level of cynicism that I think a lot of us feel. And every day, even as a first-year medical student, I'm trying to battle that and remain hopeful. And I'm just wondering how you, with all of these, bringing these problems to light, how you're teaching your kids and also kind of this generation of incoming doctors or professionals or just young people, how to remain hopeful while still trying to remain actionable?
Yeah, I mean, cynicism's really powerful, isn't it? Because it has so much explanatory power as a worldview, right? Like, the reason that person sucks is because everything sucks, and the reason that that this sucks is because everything sucks, and the reason that, you know, things are bad is because nothing matters. That's incredibly powerful, and ideas that have a lot of explanatory power tend to really resonate with us. And I know there have been many points in my life where I felt like that. I felt like controlled by that feeling. Unfortunately, the thing about cynicism is that it's just not, there's two problems with it, right? One is that it's not true. Like any worldview that can be summarized in 3 words, it's inadequate. And 2, it's not helpful. So I'd be all for cynicism if it made me get out of the bed in the morning and be a better dad or a better activist or a better writer or whatever. But all cynicism wants me to do is sit on the couch and do nothing because nothing matters. And so I have to find a fuel and energy that holds up to scrutiny, that holds up to the reality. You know, I remember thinking about this when I was a chaplain. Like, how do I go to work every day knowing that children die? How do I go to work every day, like, as a minister, knowing that children die? You know, knowing that everything doesn't happen for a reason, or if that everything does happen for a reason, like, sure as hell doesn't make any sense to me. And what I have eventually come to is that in my life, while there will always be periods where I'm overwhelmed by cynicism, have you seen The Pit? You guys have all seen The Pit, of course. It's like, it's great. It's great. So what I love about that is the sort of like, what I love about the show is the incredible competency of that main character, you know, that like the profound, you just want to have a good doctor, and if you can't have one, you at least want to see one on TV, right? And so I think what he comes to is the same thing that I've come to, which is that every person is deserving of respect, no matter, like, it doesn't matter if you are, you know, you are quote unquote responsible for what happened to you. It doesn't matter if you blew your hand off lighting off fireworks because you were drunk and it was July 4th and you made a horrible decision, and like, who the hell is so stupid as to light off fireworks drunk on July 4th? Like, you still deserve care. That is the one thing we all deserve. We all deserve care. We all deserve to be cared for. And the privilege that y'all have, that I'll probably never have again in my life, is outside of my family, is the privilege to care for strangers, and the privilege to care for people who may not experience a lot of care in their lives.
Great point. I think there was a question up here.
Hi, I'm Sean. Thanks so much for coming to talk to us. I had a question about something you mentioned earlier about how there's a lot of medical mistrust and medical misinformation, and it can be super hard to, like, reach across the aisle in a lot of ways to kind of tackle that. And so I was curious if you had any advice for us as, like, future medical professionals on how to, like, best approach those conversations where we may be talking to someone who has, obviously a very different lived experience and is exposed to very different information than we are on a daily basis.
Yeah, I mean, I recommend, I think your professors probably know a hell of a lot more about that than I do, but I mean, one thing that I find in my own life is that when people talk to me like I'm an idiot, I feel like an idiot and I get mad, and I am less likely to change my mind. And so, I think about, like, we have a lot of vaccine. I'll give you one example. Like, we've got some vaccine hesitancy in my family, not among my children or anything, but in my extended family. And like, when the COVID shot came around, a lot of people in my extended family called Hank or me and were like, well, I don't want to get this shot, but they say I got to get it to go back to work or whatever. And what worked for us was to say, what are you concerned about? Help me understand where your concerns are. And their concern was that their DNA was going to be changed, or their concern was that, and here's how we know that that's not the case. Here's how I know that it's not going to change your DNA. And yet, still, I will say, some of these family members who did end up getting vaccinated deeply regret it and feel that it has raised their risk for all kinds of cancers and because of the misinformation. And so I think it's really, really hard. I think you have to meet people. I think you have to meet people where they are. I think you have to, meet them to your point about their lived experience. Listen to their lived experience. Give them some time if you have the time to give to them. Hear them out. But it's really, really hard when there are leaders in the country who are also saying, yeah, you should be concerned about this, right? Like the strategy has always been, there's sort of one group of people who are the experts who tell you that I understand, like, it's weird to get vaccinated for a disease. It's weird to maybe be sick for a day when you don't need to be sick. Like, but we know this stuff works, and it works really well, and that's why we don't have polio, and it's really exciting, actually. That's why we don't have smallpox. It's really exciting. The progress that we've made through these things, and like we can find ways to accommodate your concerns or listen to your concerns, but like this is a really, really good thing that we do as a species, and it protects vulnerable kids, and it's really, really good. But now we don't have that, right? Because they can go to leaders in our country who are saying, well, vaccines can be pretty problematic, and maybe there have been underreporting of side effects, which we know isn't true. And so that makes this a very hard moment for the individual physician or caregiver, and I wish I had like an easy solution for you, but mostly all I have is commiseration.
Well, John, thank you so much. And sadly, we're out of time, so that's our last question. But I just want to say, when your talk was first made public to our community, it's not an exaggeration to say that the registration closed in less than 24 hours. And
oh, man.
It's even more clear to me now after spending the hour with you why. So thank you so much. Before we close, I want to thank our in-person and virtual audiences for tuning in.
Hello, Internet.
And the many staff and faculty members who made tonight's event possible, especially the planning committee of Jess Burns, Jen Greer-Morrissey, Cindy Stone, Elaine Chen, and Catherine Currid. We invite everybody to join us for a reception in 114, so you can go out those doors. Sadly, John doesn't have time to stay for a book signing, but come and join us for a reception. And John, I just want to say one more time, thank you so much for sharing yourself and your gift of your book with us tonight.
Thank you all so much. Thank you. Thank you so much.